Hey everybody, welcome back to KubeCon. We are on our last day here, and we're filled with more great interviews, just like the first 2 days, doing some great stuff. You know, I'm very privileged to have somebody from Google joining us, Gary Singh, who is, what's your title for?
I'm just a product manager.
Product manager?
Let's go with that.
Okay, on what?
On Google Kubernetes Engine.
Okay, there we go,
yeah.
Thank you. Wanted to make sure we got that right.
Oh yeah, get that in there, yeah.
Welcome, good.
Thanks for having me.
So I really want to hear the kind of Google, your perspective, because you know, how many people are coming from that, you know, era of helping create the technology, helping really build this ecosystem and fostering it. What are you taking away from this year that's really kind of standing out?
Yeah, I think, well, one, I mean, it's great, like obviously, I should plug that we're, you know, closing in on the 10-year anniversary of Kubernetes being donated open source, so that was fantastic. I think it's been nice. I mean, I've been to the last like 3 or 4 of these, you know, after the pandemic. We just got a lot of people, more users here, I'd say. I mean, obviously AI, we can maybe talk about that a little later, is obviously the big hype cycle, but you see a lot of people who are still just in the midst of, I don't want to say getting started, but really starting to like, you know, really work with Kubernetes, right? Maybe they've committed to, you know, move to the cloud. They're like, okay, now I've really got to get my workloads out there. How do I use this? What does this mean for my enterprise, right? So I'd say, I mean, at least 50% of the people here probably are not in the, you know, not a product company or like, you know, on the open source side. They're just people who want to consume and use this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And even, one of the things I've noticed is even the technology providers, so many of them have built in or built on Kubernetes as part of their offering. So it's even becoming part of the substrate of so many products and services.
Yeah, it reminds me of, you know, a long time ago, and then we were talking earlier, it reminds me of like the Java world, right? When there was a ton of people who built stuff on top of application servers, right? It became their sort of core framework, right? So I think you see more and more SaaS offerings, you know, database offerings, like all these types of stuff built literally on top of Kubernetes. And obviously you have the massive ecosystem of people building like side projects, I mean, you know, things that work off to the side or complement Kubernetes. But the number of things that are on Kubernetes is quite impressive, which to me means that, you know, for the foreseeable future, Kubernetes probably can't go away.
All right. We were talking earlier in this segment, it almost feels like, someone described it as, Kubernetes is kind of having its Linux moment, where it's becoming pervasive enough, almost so pervasive, that it's just going to be part of the substrate of so many things that we use. You know, Linux isn't everywhere, but it is everywhere. You know, kind of Kubernetes is starting to get that kind of momentum.
Oh yeah, most definitely. I think, I mean, we've seen containers, you know, have become like, you know, so popular for the last, whatever, you know, 10 sort of years, but yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to hear, like, you know, why not, maybe the thing is like, why not Kubernetes more than why Kubernetes, which, you know, is, you know, pushing the sort of boundaries of that usage everywhere, right? I mean, and everybody's got an offering. The AI, you know, I think, I mean, maybe everybody obviously wants to use the buzzword of AI, but I think you start to see, look, it makes a lot of sense, right? It's all about compute orchestration, running your stuff, packaging everything up. Why go to another paradigm, right? And it's great to see, like, I like to say the why not Kubernetes, like we're already doing this type of stuff, and like, let's not criticize. You know, I don't think people are looking at the next thing right now. They're just looking at how does Kubernetes expand into these other workloads.
Right.
I think things like the data on Kubernetes community, right? And I think like 5 years ago, people would have said, "Don't run databases on there." Right?
Yeah, don't put it in a container.
Yeah, don't put it in a container. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're right.
Then.
Put it on a VM. Don't put it in a container. Now you look at every major. Look at how many of the vendors here are all like, you know, database vendors or data vendors or data processing vendors, which is impressive.
You know, it's interesting. You know, I have quite a bit more gray hair than you do, but we've gone through a couple of generations of these cycles where new things kind of come and usher in and become pretty pervasive. You know, we're talking about Java before. We're talking about a lot of different things before that. What do you think are some of the lessons we've learned in those successive generations about adoption, solving problems? You know, hardware for AI, right? GPUs is a challenge. Throughput, scaling Kubernetes. Those are all challenges we've had in successive technologies.
Right.
What have we learned in those cycles that you think we can build upon now?
Yeah, I think you know, I think one of the interesting things is, you know, if you look back on all this stuff, at first everything sort of becomes like this like technology play, right? You always try to appeal to technologists and kind of make it the cool or the hip thing to do, right? But in a way that it generates some level of adoption, but it doesn't get the like you don't get like necessarily like big enterprises or whoever are going to do it. And these are the folks who are going to, once it's adopted by like a more traditional company, as we know, they invest in these technologies for the next 10, 15.
A bank or insurance company or,
they pick this thing up, it's going to be their platform foundation for the next like sort of 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
So I think the one thing is to learn like what is the business value, what are the problems and real use cases you can do that, and to also learn that it's a means to the end, right? So don't focus so much on the means, but focus on the end game, right? I think that's interesting in the AI space, right? Because it should not be so much about, yes, there's low-level plumbing details that we have to work out to solve people's problems, but what we really have to explain is, well, why should I go do this? What is it that's great being AI, right? The simple fact that there's 9,000 frameworks every day, right? Different versions of Python, sound familiar? Different versions of Java. How do I package this stuff together? Different teams picking something new of the week, right? How do I standardize on a core platform that's just going to enable all of those things, right? So it's the means, but not the end necessarily.
Yeah, it's interesting. Kubernetes isn't a feature, if you will, right? It's part of the substrate of what we're able to do things with, right? The kind of workflows, moving workflows to the cloud, handling challenging workflows. I mean, that's, I think, one of the strengths is being able to do more than just the normal stuff. Like, how do I distribute this? How do I handle varying changes in load, maybe drastic changes in load or geographic, all that kind of thing those are problems we've had for, forever. Now even more so because it's just commonplace to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, exactly right. I mean, I think whether you see companies that have to have, disaster recovery, high availability across, multiple regions. There's the interesting parts of the cloud, right? Where people, how do you not treat the cloud like you treated a data center? Right, so how do I make it easy to deploy in like, the US East region and like the US, the central region, right? And then what do I do if I want to have load, in EMEA, right? And how do I have my replicated stuff? And I think if you look at, you could rebuild all your compute infrastructure over and over, but to me, Kubernetes, we always talk about it as like container orchestration. To me, it's actually compute orchestration, right? And I think that's what we're also seeing like with the GPUs and everything like that, right? You have to have load balancers, you want to fail over across zones. Sure, you can map all this out in the cloud or wherever it is yourself, but in the end, you just take Kubernetes, you kind of install it, it's deployed in zones, it's going to restart your containers for you, right? If it's down in one zone, it's, you're connected to another zone. Your network overlay is already there. Like all these things are just kind of there, which allow apps to communicate with each other, they have to transparently move them around, and I think it's almost like we forgot. I think we focused so much on containers that we actually forgot that it actually like orchestrates, like you said, a substrate, but it orchestrates that whole layer, and it simplifies it fundamentally because you could do it all yourself, but why?
But why, yeah, that's a huge problem to go solve again, right?
Yeah.
How about platform engineering? That's obviously a big topic, and many organizations are adopting it, sometimes from a developer productivity standpoint. You talk about standardizing your environments and kind of making things more manageable. How does Kubernetes fit into a platform engineering kind of group's role, and what should they, if they aren't, what kind of things should they be doing with Kubernetes?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, once you get above thinking about managing the infrastructure, right? I think, yes, there is some infrastructure with Kubernetes, but as we just said, it covers a lot of the gamut of what you need to do. I think especially as people move to like, the cloud especially, right? But so now how do I look at what can I do specific to like my environment? What are some frameworks that I might need to do? What do my developers need for like more productivity, right? Invest in those tools rather than like, oh, how do I, what's my container build system or what's my communication protocol between things, right? We've handled all that in sort of Kubernetes. And then the fact that the ecosystem is so big, right? Whether you wanted to have an overlay, a service mesh, whether you need, CI/CD. I think you see people going the other route with like Backstage, right? Building this sort of self-serve platform, right?
Right.
So to me, it serves as a great foundation for that because it's abstracting a lot of the compute services, right, for you, and now you can just build whatever you want on top of that, but focused on the value for your business, as we were saying, right? Not the value of the actual like plumbing itself.
One of the challenges, maybe even knocks, I guess you could say, with Kubernetes has been is the complexity. There is a place to get to be really proficient at it. Do you see that as getting better, or what do we need to do to kind of help close that gap for folks that are adopting it?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think, I think there's still some stuff left over from I think some of this is like left over from the earlier days of Kubernetes. Like I was talking to somebody the other day, I said, imagine what would happen if we had Minikube on day one of Kubernetes, right? Because what are the confusing parts about Kubernetes? Networking. People, and you shouldn't have to like worry about that part, right? But the majority of people don't know networking, right? As we were saying, they don't. Right. So that gets confusing. So then you start to focus so much on getting it up and running that you forget about like the power of the deployments and the power of actually the higher level resources. So I think now, even whether it be a managed distribution, obviously all the stuff in the cloud, obviously we have, where I come from, we have that, but I think we've tried to take away that toil, and now sort of move that up, right, such that it should be fairly easy to sort of deploy. But it'd be interesting to come back and do a sort of a paradigm on like, what are the 5 things that like you should think about now, instead of like these things that I think have been keeping with Kubernetes for the last 10 years. I think it has gotten a lot easier and a lot simpler to do. I think some people just hear that, or they want to keep repeating that message. And maybe that's what we should focus on. Like the rest of this year is just
maybe it's more about picking your starting point. Yeah. We no longer go back and compile. Build. Yeah. Kubernetes, right? That's what we all did in the beginning.
Correct.
Let me build it. Then a lot of us got to oh my gosh, I don't think I really want to keep doing this. Let's see, what can I do, right? Who's got a distribution I can use?
Yep.
Now, where's a managed service that I can use? And so the things like security and networking, and let's face it, distributed workloads, failover, load balancing, all that's complicated shit. I mean, that's not, not every programmer is thinking about or are proficient at every one of those issues. So build on where there's already expertise, or that's been solved, or is a good service to do that. So we don't go back to try to build Kubernetes from scratch. So also don't start from networking from scratch.
Don't start from networking from scratch. Look at the sort of paradigms that are in there. But you do bring up, I think the one interesting point about, I think that on Kubernetes too, is maybe looking at how do we explain the different, I think there has to be this sort of translation. I mean, we were talking about stuff that we've done in the past, and you can call it reference learning, right? Mm-hmm. And I think if you don't give people like an existing point of reference, like what's the analogy, if you're coming from a VM world, like what is the analogy in like, Kubernetes, right? If you're coming from the network world, right? People wanted to have explicit firewall rules, IP change, IP tables. You're like, understand, network policy, right? Like, I think we need to do a better job of mapping people to the analogs, right? For their specific role, like what does that mean in like Kubernetes, right? And instead of making it seem like it's all new, it's just a different way of configuring the same thing.
Well, it's like message bus. We've been doing MQ series and Tuxedo and, was it Corba? Yeah, Corba.
Yeah.
We've been doing those in successive generations. It's with different architectures, right? Very large scale monoliths in some cases. Now we do it with microservices. So in some ways it's easier, and it's more kind of the fundamentals of how communications talk about it, instead of opening sockets and weird things we had to do that now we just call an API and do a RESTful or GraphQL kind of call. So there's analogs to what we've done, and how do we leverage that in this newer kind of paradigm, where we've got a lot more flexibility. Maybe workloads are smaller, tasks are smaller. And it's kind of interesting because to me it's one of those that gives us a lot of capability to deliver code faster, functionality faster. It also means a human can't manage it all in their head, right? You can't just lift it over to the operations team or throw it. Yeah. And you have to have that orchestration. You have to have that substrate and management capability, scalability, all of that.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't want to just like sort of throw it over the wall. And I think if you look at, and maybe sometimes people have said like, what is the role of the developer? What do they have to know about sort of like, Kubernetes? And then what's the value? I think sometimes we just, again, we don't tell them, explaining like what the value, like what pieces should you care about, right? Mm-hmm. And then that's where like the platform engineering can come in. I think if people want to build abstractions, I always say be careful not to like abstract everything. Like how many layers do you really need on top of this? It's not really that hard to write a basic like YAML. Mm-hmm. Right, and I think not. Yeah. No, and I think we see operators out there now for the databases and things like that, right? The experts are kind of doing this stuff for you. pick that stuff up rather than do it. And then I think what's the expression? I made up an expression. I think 70-30 is the new 80-20. Right? I think so many people always want to sort of tweak. I always think about what's going to get me there faster, right? If do I really need to do this extra 10% of the things that maybe it doesn't do today?
Yeah.
Am I willing to give those up for the 90% in productivity boost I get?
Yeah, you're really going to get a big enough gain to make it
Yeah.
worth getting from 80 to 90 or beyond.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think also I have this theory of we have a generation of technologists, developers, etc. We're coming up in the world of I can get it off of YouTube, I can watch this, I can download that, I can build it this way, as opposed to I have to construct it myself, which is certainly more what we had to do in a lot of my generation. And so hopefully that promotes that leverage, build upon. I don't have to do it all, know it all, right?
Yeah, it's amazing that's out there, right? Who knows what like this whole LLM thing will do for people, right? When it gives you the answer and sort of code generation. I think you have to at least know what we have to be careful of is to make sure we instill like the right concepts, right? We won't make this an AI conversation, but if you listen to anything out there, LLMs can't just do stuff for you. Like if you don't ask them you have to know to ask them something, right? So what is it I want to ask you to do? Maybe build a distributed app. What are the key sort of terms that people need to know? So I think it's, how do we make sure that people understand those, like what the tool is capable of, so they know how to sort of ask the right questions?
Kind of understand it enough to know how to use it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Or know enough about how it works. It's like the security people. They don't need to know how to write code and build API gateways, but use the networking concepts that a RESTful call makes. Oh, I recognize that. I see how that works. Okay, great. Now I have enough knowledge to be able to talk to the developers about how we're securing our APIs. Right?
Exactly, right. Understanding that within a cluster, right, that we have just an overlay network that's not publicly exposed, right, for service-to-service communication. Oh, we have a closed boundary. It's not open to people outside, right? So I think you just have to figure out that people can understand some of those sort of core basic kind of tenets, right? And it's not overly complicated. I think once you break it down to the pieces, I think it's like we just, to your point, I think a lot of people started from here's how I built it, here's all the stuff that was in here was all this sort of gorp, and I think that's like maybe slowed things down. I think now I think we're starting to seriously move past that though now, right? More and more, like I said, more and more people here are using Kubernetes, right? Yeah. Not asking how to use it for real use cases, more so than, hey, I need XYZ field in my like deployment, or what does this mean, right? We're not arguing about like silly things, right? It's like, all right, I got this massive AI workload, or I have this massive thing. How do I get the right GPUs? What's the right metric to use your autoscaler for, right? How do I get nodes spinning up faster? So they're asking the right questions.
Kind of a bad analogy, but I don't need to know how the combustion engine works in my car. But I do want to think about when's a hybrid going to be really good for me? When might I go EV? When should I stay combustion, to run my farm on or something? But
exactly.
Hey, Gary, it's been fascinating talking with you, and thanks for your good work and you and the team at Google.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
And continue to move the ball downfield. And
we'll do what we can.
Look forward to talking to you at the next KubeCon or event.
Definitely, Salt Lake City.
Okay, Salt Lake City, there you go. See, fantastic guest. I tell you the truth here on Techstrong TV at KubeCon Paris, and we're really privileged to have Gary join us today. We got more guests coming up, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hey everyone, we're here back live at in Paris at Techstrong. Well, we are Techstrong. We're at KubeCon. It's about the 4th time I've done that this week. Anyway, continuing our day 3 coverage of KubeCon. It's our last day. We're wrapping up, but we've saved some of the best for last. Let me introduce you to our next guest in that vein. His name is Ezekiel Lanza. Ezekiel is from Toronto, Canada, but he's also with Intel. First of all, Ezekiel, welcome to Techstrong TV.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. Let's start. You've never been on here before. You don't know what to expect.
No.
Don't worry, we're not going to make you sing or dance or anything like
Okay,
that.
I can dance if you want. No, it's okay.
Don't tempt us.
Much better.
We'll clear out.
Okay.
No.
You want to dance?
Ezekiel, let's a little bit about yourself, your background.
Okay, yes. My role actually is AI open source evangelist. So I work within evangelizing internally and externally the open source or the contribution, how open source is important in AI mainly. So my daily tasks are trying to talk to the internal teams that are doing contributions to PyTorch, to TensorFlow, and trying to help them to, hey, you need to show what you are doing, because one of the things is that we do a lot of things, but we are not showing that. So basically my role is to do that, and also the role as an evangelist, like being at conferences, giving talks, blogs, videos, all the parts related with that.
I didn't mention you're with Intel.
Yes.
We should let people know that, right? So when you talk about internal, external, it's around the Intel thing. So I want to dig more into that, but before we do, what did you do before that?
Well, my life was always related with pre-sales or technical sales. I have an engineering degree. I did a master's in data science. So I used to work in the old AI, right? In the era before ChatGPT. So I used to work with the NLP stuff in the past. So I work a lot on chatbots in the 2015, 2014. Like doing all the pre-sales, working with the customers to integrate, for instance, how you can integrate a chatbot to a contact center solution, for instance, mainly like that. And also, I worked a lot in the infrastructure part. So I have a CNA, as a CMP, all the infrastructure, hard networking, routing, and all this part. I've been doing a lot of work on that also. And now I completely switched from the last 4 years or 3 years. I completely switched to AI. Mainly working on computer vision use cases, and now with LLMs, because it's what we love, basically, actually.
I love it. That's fantastic. Ezekiel, people may say, as I mentioned to you off camera, we had Arun Gupta on yesterday, and we talked a lot about the commitment from Intel to the open source community, to the communities in general, And so I think our audience has heard this before, but let's reinforce that, right? So now you're the second Intel person we've had on from Intel that is dedicated to helping, well, first of all, strengthening the community. Right? Because you can have all the people who want to be part of the community, but to really give to the community, you need support. And Intel, a lot of people may look at it and say, wait, this is a company that makes chips. They make hardware. Why are they supporting software foundation?
That's a great question, and this is our main challenge all the time, because people know us for the chips, right?
Sure.
The chip could be the GPU that we launched, but it's chips. So mainly the contributions of what we do is, initially we have to enable the hardware. So to enable the hardware, people can use the features that we are launching within the hardware. We need to enable the libraries, for example, right? So we do a lot of optimizations related with AI and how the operations are done. And this is what we upstream and we offer to the community to use it, for instance. In the case of, I don't know, LLMs or computer vision or any AI use case, you can do it basically faster. But it's not just faster because you have more CPUs or more cores or more frequencies. That can help, yes. But there's a lot of work on the software, like optimizing the software, optimizing the algorithms, and this is what we mainly offer to the community. So we are very involved in what we used to say is the democratization of AI, because we would like to make it accessible to anyone and so on. But that's true, because if you have a huge model that you cannot run anywhere, you need to find a way to run it in a simple way, right?
Yeah.
So this is mainly our contributions. I don't want to go in details specifically, or we can go in details, but it's mainly we
It's your
upstream.
interview. We'll go into anything.
I mean,
you
we
want.
can be 40 minutes talking.
Yeah.
But it's mainly the optimizations story around that.
Got it. You know, the tabloids are full of stories about Elon Musk suing OpenAI
Oh yeah.
because they were supposed to be more open and do good and not for profit and all of these things. I'm going to leave my personal
Okay.
feelings out of that.
Okay.
But I think people look at it and say, you know, and then the same tabloids say AI could be very dangerous and it could, you know, be the death knell of humanity and
Like the
woe
movies.
is me, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there are other people who say, I know the answer. Open source. If we open source the AI, then, you know, evil companies won't use it for evil
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And kumbaya, we'll live in happiness, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Somewhere in there, between
Yeah.
here and there, is
Yeah.
the truth. Let's talk about what does open source AI do for us?
I think that's a great point, and we are also working in the AI open source definition, because it's not clear what is AI, right? So it's the model, is the framework, is MLOps, is the entire process. So this is not so clear yet, so we need to work on the definition on that. But I think that definitely I agree with you, but I think that we should have, we need to have in the middle between the completely open source and the completely closed, because if we think about ChatGPT and GPT and so on, and they are doing some advances that are great and awesome, but once you go into details, there's no paper, for instance. You don't know how they did what they did, right? So that's something that for the researchers, for the academia, or for most people, it's not so good, because you are doing something that you are the only one on that control, and that's okay, and that will happen, and that's something that's completely fine. But on the open source side, and same for Kubernetes, I mean, we need things that are open. Like there are a lot of models that are open, Llama, you know, Falcon, Mistral, and also the openness is not just the model; it's how you train the model, what is the data that you use to train the model, how you will be sharing that. And I had this conversation 2 weeks ago with in another conference. Is that okay? If we share that to most people, and the LLMs can be powerful, so we can use it for the bad, right?
Yeah.
So it's up to you if you like to use a layer, ethical layer, but if you don't want to use it, you're not using it. So for that part of the open source community is very important. I mean, the open source, the researchers, or the academia working on that. It's very important to have models that the ethics are within the model. I mean, even if you don't use your extra layer, the model is ethical by their own. So that's,
I agree.
That's the key part. And also for the frameworks. I mean, there's a lot of things open source on AI now and in the past. LangChain, PyTorch, TensorFlow. I mean, we have a lot of open stories, which this is the easiest part, because it's software, and we can easily see with these 4 things that we have about the open source. Like, this is software, we know that. But when we talk about AI with the models and the weights and everything, that can be a bit more complicated. But I agree that it has to be a joint conversation.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. You know, Jim Zemlin, I think it was on Wednesday at his keynote, the head of the Linux Foundation, mentioned about the Linux Foundation potentially starting an open data foundation for people who want to train their LLMs on data that's open. That is, you know, so you don't have to pay someone or you get sued later because, you know, your data source was taken from without permission.
Yeah, and that's
Is that the
really
future
needed.
you think we're looking at?
Yes, I think we need to share that, and even for other use cases. If you see in the past, for instance, we now have computer vision models that they are able to detect images or things on the image, and we don't wonder if the data used was where it was. In that case, it's getting complicated, of course, because it's much more data, you need much more data and so on. But I think that the other advancement that would be is you have the LLMs, you have the model foundation, a generic model, but I think that will keep growing, but technology is like, you need to provide the context also. So if you don't have enough data to train your own data, if you don't have it, you cannot have your model for you, for instance. If you would like to use it for finance, you need tons of data to fine tune, which is of course less than training from scratch, but you need that kind of data. So technologies like RAG or this kind of retrieval augmented generation, which is external sources that will provide the context to the foundation model, these are arising a lot, and the focus is to start to move to that context base instead of the model. I mean, the model will be smart, right?
But let's, if you don't mind, because when I heard this and I thought about it, what incentive, so we're Techstrong. I've got all these sites, they're up on the board that people can't see, but we have a lot of data, a lot of content. What incentive do I have to contribute my data to an open data foundation that that could be used to help train LLMs that maybe my competitors are going to use or so forth?
Well, that's a very great question, and I see it very similar with the concept of federated learning. One, you probably don't need to share the data. You share the weight of the model when you are training, but you're not sharing your data. But I think that if you find a common goal that you will be contributing, that's, for instance, I don't know, hospitals, or if you work to finance, or if you work, I don't know if it's easy for most banks to agree with something. But in that case, I think that there are some cases that you may say, okay, I would like to share my data, or I can use alternative methods like federated learning where you don't share your data, but you train a joint model. So in those cases, and it's the same as open source, right? So companies, they don't open source everything. They open source the part that they would like to get contributions and so on, but the entire solution, you need to have something private because it's your
Agreed. I agree with you. Agreed with you. Let's talk a little bit about KubeCon here this week.
Oof.
AI has been, like everywhere else, AI is at the top of the list. What has been your observation, though?
I mean, I've been for the last 4 or 5 KubeCons. I mean, particularly this KubeCon, it's huge. I mean, I've never seen this amount of people. I think that it's a mix between the interest on Kubernetes is growing a lot. The AI interest, of course, is also having, because we see a lot of companies using AI to automate things and to check the code or to other things.
So I would say both Gen AI and MLOps AI.
Yeah, MLOps AI, of course.
Yeah, a lot of that. And a lot of that is around the observability, which is also very big.
Yeah. So they are using AI actually. So of course this is not an AI conference. We will not go in details of explaining the model and everything, but they are using AI and they are starting to see the benefits of AI, and they are offering that to the partners, to the community and everything. So it's,
absolutely,
it's huge.
If you don't mind, let's talk a little bit about Intel's AI initiative. So it's openai.intel is where people can find out.
We have open.intel, which is our, where you can see all the open initiatives that we have with Intel, but the other is AI at Intel, and that's another initiative that is mainly in AI, which is not just LLMs. So you can see optimizations. We also have some solutions as a service offerings. But it's mainly, you go to that site and you will see everything that we are doing, contributions, services, and everything.
Excellent, man. All right. I don't think anything else we want to share.
I mean, let's be open. Let's try to share your data when you want to share your data. Let's see what happens next year with AI.
So I think this whole thing about sharing data and AI, by next, I went to law school 50 years ago. But back then I had a very good constitutional law teacher, and he always taught us technology, well, the court system
Yeah.
is usually 3 to 4 years behind technology.
I would say more, but that's
Well, this was a long time ago,
Yeah.
before we had an internet.
Yeah.
You know, this is early 80s.
Yeah.
Or late 70s, early
Yeah.
80s. Now, I think this whole issue over use of data is going to take a couple of years
Yeah.
for us to figure out from a
And-
legal perspective.
And we have that same problem. I mean, even with Facebook or
Absolutely.
Facebook exists, I don't know, 20 years, and we are now starting.
The whole social media thing.
Exactly.
It's ruined the country. It's ruined the world in many
Yeah,
cases.
elections, everything.
Because that's not even a case of the law catching up. It's a case of society.
oh yeah,
Like, you know, a lot of people, they can't tell the difference between fact and fiction. You know, and that's a whole...
oh yeah,
That could be the next interview.
oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah.
Anyway, Ezekiel, thank you
Thanks
so
so
much, my friend.
Thanks for having me.
Ezekiel Lanza, OpenAI, excuse me, not OpenAI. AI, well, it is OpenAI, but a different company.
It's not only
Right.
it's a different company. Yeah.
AI and open source advocate from Intel here at KubeCon in Paris. We'll be back in just a minute. We got some folks from Equinix next.
Right.
Excellent.
Everybody, welcome back to KubeCon here in Paris 2024. Day 3, more fantastic interviews. We've told you we've got some amazing guests, and we do, and it just gets better and better all the time. We're going to talk about projects, open source projects, and what some of the needs projects have, and how can companies collaborate, contributors collaborate, provide resources and things that projects need. I'm joined by a couple great folks, Jeff and Steve. Jeff, you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jeffrey Sika. I'm the head of projects at the CNCF.
Great. Steve Martinelli?
Hey, I'm Steve. I'm a director of developer advocacy over at Equinix. And as part of that mission, I also help out with our open source project program.
Very nice. And you both have been kind of involved in open source for a better part of your careers, right?
Yeah, just about. You want to go first?
Yeah. I've been working with open source projects for at least 20 years, and I was a Kubernetes contributor even way back in 2014. So
early days.
Early days. So maintainers and contributors are my people. Like, I hang out with them a lot more than, other portions within the foundation. So, I feel like I have a pulse on what project needs and what maintainers need. And I'm passionate about the projects.
And you're a staff member with CNCF, so what does that entail? Besides everything, whatever needs to be done.
Besides what fire to put out.
Yeah.
I know a lot of the maintainers in the projects, and I know a lot of the foundation staff, and it really is just trying to interface the two and make sure that everyone is coming out and getting what they need and having positive outcomes.
And your name's Jeff, but your handle is?
Gphy. So
Gphy, all right.
A little over 20 years ago, a friend of mine misspelt my name on AOL Instant Messenger, and it stuck.
Be careful. Those mistakes become lifelong decisions.
Yep.
Sometimes. Steve, how about your story?
It was 2012, and IBM was doing its usual reorg, and I landed in this open source team. I joked that I was traded for future consideration. Because it's not like my team got something in return. It was just like I just
kind
got
of banished to open source or something.
Yeah, banished to open source land. And this is 2012, right before I was going on vacation too.
Of course.
But honestly, it ended up being such a great time in my career. It's my favorite 5 years. I was working on OpenStack, just doing upstream development every day for 5 years. It was a wonderful time in my career. I look back on it very fondly. I ended up being a maintainer on probably a half dozen projects and a project lead for for the identity and authorization service. Just a great time. Got to travel the world. Got to go to my first conferences, speak at them. Great times. And ever since then, I've been smitten with open source. It's always been a part of me. So
it really shaped that career trajectory, right?
Yeah, it really did. It was great for that.
Excellent. Well, we always think about contributors of open source projects doing some of the things you guys have done of writing code, debugging, all the activities. But you got to have an environment to run those things on. Obviously, that's a big plus of Equinix being such a strong sponsor of projects. Is it just, here's some hardware, go have fun, or what do you have to do to support projects so they can be productive?
Yeah, so it's kind of a big question there. So you can imagine with 250 data centers all over the world, we have a lot of hardware. As part of our Equinix Metal offering, which is our dedicated cloud, where you kind of have the best of both worlds. You have the performance of bare metal, so you can get right down to the silicon as much as you want, but you're also getting the best practices of cloud, so you can provision those servers in about 2 minutes. You select through our console, go select the operating system there, select the server configuration, the metro, and all of a sudden 2 minutes, you've got your bare metal Ubuntu server. And I forget where I was going with this one here.
So what are kind of the things that projects need, right? There's compute and storage.
So there you go. So with that, we give them the compute. And it's really just comes down to what the projects need. So the projects will often need, they want to do their development. So they want to end up incorporating their bare metal servers in their CI/CD pipelines, right?
So we'll see them use Equinix Metal for, again, CI pipelines, doing builds. A very common pattern actually is them doing performance testing and actually integrating performance testing into their CI builds. Over 180 projects. We have a bunch of networking projects, CNI and service mesh projects. And they need to be, again, as you said, as close to silicon as possible, because they're not just running in, cloud providers, they're also running in data centers. And they need to make sure that the performance is solid. It will scale out. So Equinix gives them that, and it works out really well.
Sounds like that fabric of 250 worldwide data centers has got to be a big plus too. Like, I do need to do distributed apps, not just in a data center, but across geolocations, maybe different kinds of hardware, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Actually, one of my favorite stories out of our open source partner program is probably Alpine Linux, which is the base image for a bunch of containers out there. And they're a big consumer of Equinix Metal, and we're happy to support them. We give them access to both x86 and ARM servers, and they're able to not only build the different images and their daily images and all that fun stuff, but they also use us to distribute those images also. So it's great.
Talk about the importance of ARM, because that comes up more and more. I mean, I've talked with so many people about, not just at the edge, but in the data center.
Yeah, so it's funny, I saw every time I read about ARM, it's always in terms of performance and efficiency. And to me, it just seems like even on our MacBooks, right? With the M1s, they just seem to be a step ahead. I can't say much more than that.
I mean,
have you seen a lot of demand for it?
Significant demand. A lot of our projects actually try and cross-compile, so they're hitting AMD 64, ARch and ARM, and then other less common platforms. But I mean, at this point, AMD and ARM, AMD like 64, between that platform and then ARM, they're pretty much treated like first-class citizens with the projects.
It's
so
interesting. I was talking with somebody from ARM about, just as an aside, how much do you think Apple moving to the M1 the ARM architecture, even though it's not ARM's product, has really opened the wide up, because now we need all that stuff to run locally a lot of times, right? Yeah,
it definitely did not hurt. All of a sudden, all those developer tools had ARM 64 builds very quickly.
Funny how that happened.
Yeah, Equinix actually had a big part in helping out with the Works on ARMS project, and actually helped a bunch. This is before my time though, and shout out to Ed Vilmetti for doing a lot of the legwork here, who still works with GFI today. We worked a lot on the Works on ARMS project, and just getting a lot of different developer tools and developer libraries up to being ARM 64 compliant. Because
I just want to not only plus one and say thank you, Ed, but he was actually going to every individual project asking them, how can I help? How can we enable, provide ARM enablement? Do you need resources? Do you need engineers? It was a Herculean effort done by a single man.
Shout out to Ed.
Shout out Ed. Ed's the star here on this show. Thanks to Ed. How about, so why is bare metal? Why is being able to develop performance test on bare metal so important, as opposed to tossing it into some whatever virtualized environment, cloud service, and kind of taking it from there?
I think a lot of it comes down to performance. A lot of it comes down to needing control. So, when you're doing driver-specific or hardware-specific things, you want access to that hardware. You don't want a virtualized, kind of a virtualized version of it. You want to actually test on those things. So, for operating systems, they kind of want to access, they need that control, so they need access to the hardware. What do you see?
With projects, it is, unless you've run into this issue, you might not think about it. But with cloud providers, you're still fundamentally, usually, running on a virtual machine or in some hypervisor, some not directly silicon, environment. And projects run into issues where they might break the hypervisor, or they might run into some compatibility issue with a certain version of what the hypervisor is. And there's no real other way to debug that other than either try a different cloud. Oh, they might be set up the same way, or go to bare metal, and then you're essentially eliminating all of the middlemen, and then going, okay, it's either my code or it's the hypervisor, and then they at least know they need to debug somewhere else.
It's eliminating yet another variable when you're doing these things.
How about the need to deploy on bare metal? Is that increasingly a need projects have? Because you hear about Kubernetes on bare metal. things like that?
Yeah, for me, it comes down to use case, I guess. We're seeing a lot of use cases for bare metal. When it comes to CI/CD, when it comes to backup and disaster recovery, when it comes to streaming, again, it really takes advantage of the latency and performance there. Online gaming, that sort of stuff. We see a lot of use cases around there. You're not going to use bare metal to deploy Hello World. You're not going to use it for your sample app. But in cases where you want like data sovereignty, or performance and latency, I think bare metal is a great choice for that.
Makes a lot of sense.
So, off script, sorry. How much like AI deployments? I'm sorry, I have to bring AI.
I was going AI next.
Oh, really?
Let's talk about where AI fits into this.
I'm just curious, like how much in the last year you've seen, like in terms of uptick.
So, what was it? What did the NVIDIA CEO just say, like yesterday or 2 days ago? Data centers are AI factories or something like that. I thought that was really cool. I'm like, yeah, data centers are getting a second wind here.
New tagline. We just got that up on our website 5 minutes after he did that.
What a great soundbite there. And so yeah, Equinix just announced this partnership with NVIDIA. I'm still maybe one step or two steps removed from all that stuff, but yeah, it's like a ton of demand.
It is. I mean, that seems to be, shortage of getting video cards, shortage of getting chips, shortage of, okay, now how do I get that in the cloud and service providers?
And it's funny because there's such limited supply right now, and it kind of makes sense if you're, renting a GPU from a cloud, you're probably paying an astronomical price for that per hour. If you actually bought that card and put it in your data center, you're probably saving a bunch of money in the long term. So it's a big supply and demand problem right now because people can charge basically whatever they want. So it's an interesting problem to be in, and I think data centers are well positioned to take advantage of this.
It seems like it's, AI isn't a new field, but the budding need for so many GPUs and specialized chips, that's hard for someone who's building a data center to know what, you build to the capacity you're going to need in 5 years, not what you need today. So how do you know what you're going to do? In your environment, you can build to that evolving need in the market, staying whatever steps ahead of to be able to do that. So when the demand's there, you can satisfy it.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out to our folks working in our data centers who are actually like the technicians and the operators. They're handling that, and the folks actually planning all the server deployments there. So they do a phenomenal job.
That they do. Thank God they're there. We wouldn't be here without them, right?
A lot of things would be breaking right now without them.
I don't want to offend anybody, but they're doing God's work here. This is important stuff they're doing, right? Good things. What's kind of on the horizons for projects and what people are working on that you're kind of grabbing your attention?
Yeah, no. So it's kind of interesting, I of course threw out the AI thing, but we also are seeing, AI related projects starting to be submitted to the CNCF. We have Kate's GPT, which, lets you do LLM analysis of a cluster and kind of aids in debugging. It's meant to be an SRE with superpowers, I think is the tagline.
Well, I like that. There's another tagline.
Oh, yeah. But also, you look at what the CNCF provides applications. In my mind, AI and LLMs are kind of the application layer. So what does cloud native have that we could enable LLMs to perform better? So let's talk about telemetry. There was a project that was submitted, didn't get in, but they were asked to reapply in 6 months called Open LLMetry. It's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But
EIO.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
But the whole purpose of it was getting out telemetry data from LLMs, not just like GPU information, but, tokenization, all of that.
That sounds like a phenomenal
We're going to see, in my opinion, we're going to see a lot more of those kind of projects coming in. Now, what about the projects that are already here? Believe it or not, and this is what I was trying to allude to, we already have projects asking for GPUs, and I'm like, what?
Why? No, you should be asking why.
Well, first, what? Then, okay, what is your use case? Still waiting to hear back. I'm not sure if they want to spin up an LLM and try and integrate it with, their project.
Maybe experimentation.
And like,
could be a specific use case.
I am here for this. I want to enable this, but I also want to make sure that it's kind of used responsibly and they're not just wasting like an A100 for a month.
People wasting resources on cloud? You don't say.
I mean,
users
that's my
are
life.
users at anywhere in the stack. They're going to ask for what you never expect, right?
Yeah.
Well, it also, it's very easy to just be like, I want this now. Click. You're done.
Well, and as soon as you say, I don't need that, you'll need it tomorrow, right? So tell me, I don't want to make a, big huggy thing for Equinix, but what's it like working at a company that really is, you're supporting open source projects in a big way, and you've been a contributor, so you know what it's like to be on the other end of that.
Oh, yeah.
Resource-starved projects at times.
It's funny because the really, really popular projects get a lot of the contributors, get a lot of the hardware resources, get a lot of the the flyby contributors, get a lot of maintainer support. It's all the other projects, which probably outnumber them 10 to 1, that are like, hey, can I have some help too?
Yeah, what about me too?
Yeah.
I could use a little bit of help over here.
And it's just as being on the other side there, and now I'm able to actually help out also in terms of providing credits and infrastructure for these resources too. But that's just our way of contributing and helping out projects. You can contribute with whatever ability you have, whether that's documentation, whether that's hosting a meetup, whether that's going to a more local KCD if you can't come here. There's ways that you can contribute open source more than just lines of code.
Well, and I got to believe it's valuable having a role like yours that can maybe do the interpretation, if that's a good word, of what are projects asking for, why do they need it? It's just not giving them free resources because it's nice to have, right? Here's why they need these things, use cases, whatever it is. And then translate that to folks that may not know as much about it.
Yeah. It's, it definitely gets fun being a translator.
Jeff, GP, if you had any advice for projects, maybe like folks that are submitting one, what are some of the capabilities they have access to they may not be aware of yet?
So the short answer is we have a website that lists everything because we have a lot of things that we offer. The simple answer is we will try and do whatever we can to give projects what they need. We certainly have a full list of resource providers that we offer, like Equinix, services we offer like helping them in the project pavilion or events, marketing, swag, etc. But really, that's not like a finite list. We'll provide that, and then at the bottom of that website that I just mentioned, we say, and if you need anything else, please reach out to us. We are happy to talk. Because I can't predict what a project needs in 3 or 6 months. Like, if we try to prescribe too many things, if we try to put projects in a box, we're going to stifle their growth. And we just can't do that. Like, the whole reason, look at all of this, the whole reason we're here is because we kind of let projects go and do what they're best at, which is innovate and hack on cool stuff. And then, oh hey, 12,000 person convention, hi.
Great, well, thanks to both of you.
Thank you.
Contributing when you were developing and contributing with what you're doing now in your roles. And there's no one person could make this all happen. It's all these different roles and contributions that everybody makes, and the belief and sustainment of that. So thanks, guys. We appreciate it very much.
No problem.
Great talking with you, Steve. Jeff?
Yep, takes a village.
Absolutely. Thanks both to Equinix and to the CNCF team here, having both Jeff and Steve here with us. So, like I said, amazing people we're talking. We really talk to the people who are helping make this happen, and there are so many folks playing vital roles like these two guys are. So stay tuned. We got more great interviews coming right back up here from KubeCon in Paris. So same bat channel, same bat station. Don't go away.
Hey everyone, we're back here live in Paris. Day 3 coverage. I feel like day 3 DevOps. Day 2 DevOps. No, but it's day 3 of KubeCon. We're in Paris. We're coming to you live on Techstrong TV and the whole Techstrong network. Let me introduce you to our next guest. This is a real-life DevOps analyst right here. Paul Nashawati. Paul is with the Futurum Group. If you were tuning in yesterday, we had another Futurum analyst on. We're happy to have Paul on, though, because he's their DevOps guy. Well, Paul, I hope I didn't steal your whole story.
No, not at all.
First of all,
Alan,
welcome. Welcome to Techstrong.
thank you, Alan. Thank you. It's great to be here. It's great to be here. You know, I really love the warm intro you just did. Love DevOps. It's really my passion. It's where I live. App dev, app modernization. It's kind of like that space that I'm in.
So, you're fairly new to Futurum, but you're not new to DevOps, as you mentioned. Let's hear a little bit of the Paul story.
Sure, yeah. No, thanks for that. So, definitely a little bit new to Futurum. I built a practice, an analyst practice, about 4 years ago. In the app dev space, app modernization, app development, growth in that space, focused on the CI/CD pipeline, really about cloud native, past, present, and future states. Prior to being an analyst, I was in the vendor world for about 25 years, both large and small companies, took 4 companies to events, so really understand that kind of startup mentality, but also the big company politics as well.
Yep. It's very hard to do something for a job if you're not passionate about it. Where's your passion in DevOps?
Oh, wow. So I have a passion. I wrote a book on rapid application development. So, for dummies book. So, I really, that's my passion. I really love it. So when I look at DevOps, I look at the day 0, day 1, day 2, right? The build, release, and operation side of it. I look at what it means to build those applications, get them out the door. What does it mean from a perspective of today's technology versus what's happening in current stance, but also what's happening in the future, right? I'm looking at monolithic applications moving to microservices and containerization, but I'm also looking at serverless and WASM and WebAssembly and where that's going. So it's really kind of an evolving state, really exciting time.
It has been. Well, so March 14th was the 10-year anniversary of us doing DevOps.com, publishing DevOps.com. Thank you. So we've been, in this DevOps space a while, and I've certainly seen changes, evolution over the 10 years. But you know what I just realized, before we get into that, there are people out here who maybe aren't familiar with Futurum.
Oh, okay.
So as I mentioned, you're the DevOps guy there, right?
I am.
But there's more to Futurum than DevOps. If you would, I don't want to take us off track, but take a minute, explain to our audience, how is Futurum organized?
Absolutely. So Futurum has a broad set of offerings that allow organizations to really help their go-to-market strategies, understand how they're going to broadcast who that company is, what their message is, where they're trying to get out to the market. So whether it's video assets or written assets or content, anywhere from top of funnel, mid funnel to conversion assets, have been really helping that go-to-market and drive through. So, but first and foremost, I look at it in the context of being a primary research firm. That's where I focus on, is a research element, but there's a media element as well, and there's intelligence portal, but with the practices, there's 14 practices throughout Futurum, the Futurum group. They're everything from cybersecurity to infrastructure to storage to networking to all the things you can imagine.
Sure.
And of course, application development. That's where I fit in.
Absolutely.
And that's where I focus in on.
Excellent. All right, we got that out of the way. Well, Daniel, you're welcome. But let's now focus back in on DevOps, because both of our passions lie there.
Absolutely.
As I said, 10 years on, I've seen a lot of water under this DevOps bridge.
Right.
I mentioned to you off camera, we're doing this whole report on what we call DevOps Next. Where do you see us on this journey, on this DevOps journey, as an industry, as an ecosystem, as a community?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I'm looking forward to your DevOps Next report. That also aligns nicely to this observability report I'm putting out as well. So I'm looking forward to collaborating with you on that. But let's talk about the evolution, right? It really is still in maturity, right? There's organizations that are out there that have IT in lines of business. Then there's organizations that have IT DevOps in lines of business. organizations that have IT, DevOps, SREs, and lines of business, and then platform engineering, of course, that comes into the play as well.
Right.
So when you look at this kind of evolution, it really depends on where the organization is in a maturity cycle.
Yeah.
I was talking about, here we are live on the show of KubeCon. I'd give you a nice shiny quarter if you find me somebody that identifies as a server or a storage admin. They're not,
No.
right? Who are they? They're platform
engineers.
Right?
So, and I'm glad you brought this up, because here's my take on platform engineering. You know, to quote Shakespeare, a rose by any other name would still smell as sweet. We've been doing things that are platform engineering, we just didn't call it that.
Right.
But the kinds of things that platform engineers do are the kinds of things that have needed to get done.
Sure.
I think more than anything, platform engineering as a term has arisen because I was never a fan of the term DevOps engineer, right? I think DevOps is more about multifunction teams,
Yeah.
but saying someone's a DevOps engineer, I understood why a lot of engineers, a lot of people who are today calling themselves platform engineers, said, no, what the heck's a DevOps engineer,
Right.
I do CI/CD, I do ops, or I do, So I get that. But I also think there's a continuum that's even bigger than the ones you spoke about. I think it starts way here to the left with Agile, right? Agile is 25 years old.
Absolutely.
It's pretty well defined. Where Agile leaves off, sort of DevOps picks up. And when I say DevOps, I mean in many flavors, including SRE, including platform engineering, including that whole software supply chain and SDLC. But then it goes further right to ITSM, to service management.
Right.
This is the world we live in the software factory.
Yeah.
Right? And I think the sooner we realize that, like how you said how organizations are kind of defining themselves, I think those are artificial silos that eventually got to come together a bit.
Yeah, Alan, I think it comes down to what are the business KPIs? What are businesses trying to release? So when I look at my recent research and I see just a sub 400 respondent survey, I found that 24% of those organizations that responded to my survey want to release code on an hourly basis, but yet only 8% are able to do so. But the 8% that are able to do so touched on what you're talking about. Their commonalities between it was agile software development, they could use DevOps practices, they use infrastructure as code, and basically they push it out that way. Now, the reason why that's important to note is because when you look at the release cycles and you look at pushing code out the door, DevOps KPIs will get the code out the door, push it out, right?
Yeah.
But they'll also need to worry about things like quality. Right? And when QA is going, hey, I got a problem, that's, DevOps like, I need to push it out the door, right? Well, what I found in my trending survey is from 2022, I found that only 29% of organizations are doing continuous testing.
Really?
Only in the CI/CD pipeline, right? But in 2023, it jumped up to 66%.
That's more what I see. Okay.
Right, and the reason behind that, in my mind, while I was kind of talking through this, was these organizations were using their end user clients as the test bed.
As the beta testers, right?
And their justification was, well, we use software agile methodologies, we're pushing code out.
Yeah, I never loved
every
that.
2 weeks, right? Not a good model, right? Because you lose the...
Well, you're making your customers guinea pigs.
Exactly, not a good place to be, right?
So I'll interject one thing, because we are here at KubeCon.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons for that jump, though, too, Paul, is the whole GitOps Argo, which is a huge CNCF project here. Argo that allows us to do our CI/CD within a cloud-native stack, within a cloud-native system, and there's a place for testing in there to the left of deployment, right?
Yeah.
And then, so one of the things we do at Techstrong, right, is we have this video series called DevOps Unbound, sponsored by Tricentis. And, they're kind of the leaders in continuous testing. That's their tagline. They've really made so much progress because of this cloud native stack. As cloud native has become more dominant, continuous testing as part of your release cycle has become easier, more organic, and I think that's a reason you see that jump too.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think part of the continuous testing continuum there fits into the adoption of using open source as well. Right, so if you start using open source, we find that in our research that 87% of organizations that responded, they want to work with vendors that sponsor open source projects.
Yes.
But they also don't want to go at it alone, so they want those vendors to provide enterprise level support. So, but when I bring up open source in relation to testing, the reason why these vendors these organizations want to work with the vendors that sponsor these projects is because open source hardens the code. People can bang on it, make sure it works, and then it comes out the door and says, okay, now it's proven it works, it's tested, and it works in the ecosystem. And plus you have community support, so if something goes wrong, you can lift it from there.
Well, that's one of the reasons why this place is so damn crowded and they do so well, right? It's this foundational open source model where that rising tide lifts all the boats.
Absolutely.
And then vendors get to kind of riff off of that, right? But you bring it up, but now we're starting to see a little bit of a backlash around open source vendors and changing licensing and saying, wait a second, we got to supporting this open source project or training for it is not enough for our business model. I can't make a business where converting 4% of my users is my success formula.
Right.
I got to do more. I got to figure out how to wring out more revenue from that model.
Yeah.
And I think we're just entering that kind of phase here. It's going to have repercussions.
Oh, for sure, right?
Yeah.
And the way I would see it is, there are many vendors that use work with open source models, right? If you don't have strategic differentiation, and this is something that I work with a lot of my clients with, it's like, what are your 3 to 5 strategic differentiation points? If you don't have those points, and truly understand why those points are differentiators, then it's going to be very difficult to cut through the noise. There's a lot of noise.
Well, no, take observability, which is what you're working on now, right?
Right.
Look, at the end of the day, how many of them are just open telemetry and Prometheus, maybe a little Grafana under the covers?
Right. So where's the table stakes? Right. If you have
table stakes.
Right,
you better do something more than that. You want my money.
That's right. If you have 5, 6, 7 companies doing the same thing using open telemetry, where are the 3 to 5 things that make it work?
And I think, look, there are going to be companies that struggle with that, and quite frankly, may not be around.
Well, I mean, look what's happening in the industry, right? You have the Cisco Splunk acquisition, right? You have the merging of different companies that are going under PE, and really getting investment from those, and they're consolidating. They're coming together. You're going to
see a lot of this.
You're going to see a lot of it, and because of that differentiation. So I would strongly recommend vendors that are looking at these using open source to put their products forward, but validate their differentiation against market data. That market data is really going to provide that solid point to say this is why it matters, and find that little spot that makes it work.
And by the way, this is not just a problem for the smaller guys.
No.
I think even some of the companies you mentioned need to figure out what their sauce is. What's their special sauce here? Those 3 to 5 points. It'll be interesting. I think we're certainly in for consolidation. I think observability in particular is going to change drastically.
Consolidation and rapid expansion of the ecosystem.
Absolutely. We're probably talking, I don't know how, I forgot, I didn't time it. But we haven't even mentioned AI yet. We got to talk.
We have to talk about AI.
Yeah.
I mean, if we didn't, we miss it.
Yeah. So AI and DevOps. What do you see there?
Oh well, AI and DevOps. I did a study around AI impacts to the developers, right? And what we find is 18% of organizations are using AI in their production code, but 27% of organizations are in consideration. That they're thinking about it. They're trying to understand what's going on with it. So why is that? Well, there's a little bit of uncertainty. I mean, we saw with a recent airline that they put out some stuff that didn't actually help them, right? Because they try to blame it on the AI, but it's like it's their business, right? So but the common use cases like for DevOps and developers, I mean, rapid code creation, documentation, customer satisfaction, knowledge base, those are the real use cases. But what I'm finding in our research, is it varies based on geographic locations. The adoption
really?
Yeah, very much so. There's some parts of the world that are much more willing to adopt faster than other parts. So, for example, we're in EMEA right now. We're in Paris right now. much more conservative in EMEA than it is in, say, APAC.
What about North America?
North America's somewhere in the middle.
Really?
Yeah, somewhere in the middle. Yeah,
I guess when
according to
you
the
think
research.
about it, that's kind of, I could see the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, we could share those data points, but the thing is when you look at it, it really does come down to look at what organizations are doing. I mentioned earlier about releasing code on an hourly basis.
Right.
Applications are being developed very, very rapidly now. If you're not using some type of AI to take actionable insights and do some automation, you're competitively going to be behind. There's not a firm, an organization out there that can put enough people, resources, behind creation of applications moving forward. It has to be generated with autonomous ways of doing it. Because if it's not, you're just going to be falling behind. And then if you're not using that automation to do it, the impacts of security, the impacts of bugs, the impacts of anything will fall off, and your product will be impacted by
Look,
that.
to me, it's a speed of business issue.
Absolutely.
If you're not automating, you're in that right lane, and you're going to have people blowing their horn at you all day, right?
Yeah, correct.
That's the bottom line. I sit here listening to you talk about hourly. That's the goal, hourly. So you're talking to someone, in my last venture-backed company that I co-founded, we were really proud of ourselves when we went from twice a year to quarterly.
I know, yeah.
We thought, my God, how am I going to finish all the testing
Right.
in a quarter, right? Now we talk about hourly.
Oh, waterfall versus agile, right?
Well, we were, it wasn't that long ago, we thought we were doing agile.
Right.
Maybe what we were really doing was fast waterfall.
Fast waterfall.
But that being said, that's the world we live in today. And that's why when we talk about things like automation and we talk about things like AI, you're not going to hit those KPIs without those
Not at all.
technologies.
Not at all.
It's just,
Not at all. It's just
I
going
don't
to
care how
accelerate.
big a team you have.
That's
Because
right.
at some level, the more people you add, the more time it's going to take for people to do, to coordinate.
Right.
Good stuff. Paul, where can people get access to some of your reports and stuff?
Oh, I appreciate that. So the futurumgroup.com is where my page is, my information is. Most of my research from the briefs and such they're ungated, so you can go there right now and pull it right off the site. I do have some contact information there if you want to reach out to me directly and talk to me.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Hey man, thank you for coming
Thank you.
on.
It's been great.
Futurum Group. I don't want to mess up your last name. Paul Nashawati.
You get it.
Got it. Paul Nashawati here on Techstrong TV. We're coming back to you live from Paris in just another minute. Stay tuned as we wrap up day 3.